This is the coolest TIG welding trick I've ever discovered. Oh dude, this is so exciting. So anyone who's ever welded together tubular structures with thin wall tubing knows how heartbreaking it is when you get everything welded up, you know, you clamp to the table, you weld all your joints, and you undo your clamps, and the whole thing goes boom, because it pulled, it warped. Especially on a structure like this, where it's not a cube, it's actually a top and legs, and then there's nothing establishing the gap down here, so they're free to warp and move. And I can illustrate you my problem here. See this gap? This table's perfectly level, and the level is supported here on the center, because these legs are off the table. So these middle two legs are on the table, and from this point to this point, it's level because they're on the table. Well, look what happens here. There's a 1/4 inch gap here, and there's probably even more gap by the time the level gets down to here. But I don't have a long enough level to show you that. Well, I do, let's see. Yeah, look, I'm holding it level, and there's a 1 inch gap all the way down here. So what happened is right at this joint, this tube coming into this top rail, specifically speaking, these two fillet welds on the corner, and I laid them in I'm using very thin filler and very thin tongues. I'm using 045 stainless filler, keeping my fillets as small as possible. Even still, when I laid these two welds in here, this joint here bent because these two welds contract, and it folded this top tube over the end of this tube, just dunk. And so how do you fix that? Well, you have to play with the metal's natural propensity to shrink. So if you heat metal, most metals, if you heat it and then it cools, it's gonna shrink past its original form. If you imagine a tube like this, right? And there's a seam here. When you heat where my fingers are, if you heat there, it expands, and then as it cools, it's gonna cool past its original point, especially if you cool it faster than the room temperature will, like with an air gun. So what I did here, well, I'm just gonna show you in real time what had happened. So the trick I'm gonna do is I take my TIG torch, and I've fully welded all the seams. I'm gonna pretend like there's a joint here, like there's gonna be another tube coming up, right? I'm not gonna use any filler, but what I'm gonna do is strike an arc and just melt the metal in a line right here and right here. And as that cools, especially when I cool it faster with the air gun, it's gonna shrink in an equal and opposite way to these. So it's essentially going to replicate what these welds did, but cancel out because it's on the opposite side of the tube. Now Aaron did, if you're a member of our Patreon, you saw the video of Aaron doing this with the torch. And just now I was like, well, if the torch does that, this should do it too. I have this in my hand already. I don't want to have to get the torch out, and you may not have a torch. You know, it's a lot easier to get a TIG welder in your shop than it is to rent a giant set of oxyacetylene bottles. Now, of course, they have small bottles you can get, but like, why have two tools when you can do the same thing with one? So I'm gonna show you in real time. So I'm gonna do 2 passes here, cool it. I'm gonna go over here and do 2 passes and cool it, because both of these legs are bent and I need them to come up incrementally together. I don't want to just straighten one all the way, because this one down here they're fighting each other because they're connected down here. So I'm gonna shrink this one a little bit, shrink that one a little bit, go back and forth, and I already did it over here. It took about two cycles, but I want you to just continue to keep an eye on this gap here, especially when I'm done welding and I go to cool, because you'll see it move. All right, so here we go. I'm gonna burn a line here and a line here. See that? I'm just autogenously melting the metal. I can feel it moving under my hand. So I've done that, right? And now I grab my air gun and cool it. So yeah, it shrunk it about 1/8 of an inch. So, and this side's worse because that side's got angle on it, keeping it from warping. So now, each gap is gonna help the other side because they're connected. So now I'm gonna go over here. I'm gonna bring this with me. I'm gonna need that air gun in a second. Okay, doctor. Scalpel, and I'm gonna seal it. So when I'm welding, it's expanding. So the gap should get worse, but then when it cools, it shrinks beyond its original position. So now I'm gonna jump back to this side again. This side's a little better already because that side relieves some stress in the entire system. So now I'm just gonna go up here, and the important thing to do is to burn a new line in a different spot. So you don't wanna burn over the same spot. You wanna just choose right next to it. This is just based on feeling more than anything, but like virgin metal seems to react more than metal that's already been heat cycled. So now I'm gonna go on the outside of each of these lines. Okay, this one might do it. We're real close. This joint here took 3 passes on this side. So I'm gonna do another whole cycle and it should be good.
I mean,
it's really close. So I'm just gonna go do a 3rd pass on this one while I'm standing here. Isn't that crazy?
That's nuts.
I mean, that part's a little low, but like, look at the level.
Compared to earlier?
I've shrunk an inch gap on the end. That might be my favorite trick I've ever learned. And honestly, shout out Aaron for looking up how the metal behaves like that. It really doesn't matter what you heat it with, you just heat it in the line. So the idea is you heat the side that you want to shrink. That's all you need to remember. And you heat it in a line so it folds in a predictable way. And the cool thing about this, I was actually thinking about this last night. Theoretically, you could take a straight piece of metal and by heating crazy ways, you could make it like do all sorts of stuff. And now the big payoff is look straight down this line.
Oh my God.
Are you kidding me? Get out of town. It's just, I'm so happy. Because now, if you learn this trick, you no longer have to spend time while you're welding worrying in the back of your mind like, oh my God, I hope it doesn't warp, I hope it doesn't warp. Literally just clamp it down, weld it, have fun welding. I've had a blast welding all this 16 gauge stainless. Shout out, we have a water-cooled TIG welder now. Shout out HTP. But just, you get to weld your project, have fun. If it warps, so be it. Just study how it warped and at which joints it warped, and then go undo the warp with this trick. So the key to do this with an oxy torch. So if you've got an oxyacetylene torch in your shop, you either have this end, which is called a rosebud, or you have this end, which is a cutting torch. So if you were to do this with a torch, which you very well can do, you need to get what's called a brazing tip. So the brazing tip allows you to focus the flame in a really, really tiny cone, which is essentially how they TIG welded before there were TIG welders. You would torch weld, and that's how you did it. You melt just a little bit of the metal and you get still your filler. It'd be the same method, but way more chaotic. So the TIG welder, you can see the paths, right? You can just do it in a really controlled way. And there will be a countertop on this, so I'm gonna polish this and everything. And there's gonna be a few little craters and whatnot, but there's gonna be a countertop on it, so it doesn't matter. And you don't risk like overheating it, like you just creep up on, because this is 1/16 of an inch thick. And like, look, I have zero, like all 4 of these legs are touching the table too, which is like mind blowing. I'm just so happy, and like, I wish a decade ago I watched this video, seriously, because it would have just blown my brain wide open. Oh, I'm so happy. I mean, there's probably people out there going like, duh, idiot, but I didn't go to welding school.
Yeah.
I learned from like old guys that are just like, aim it and go, you know, like this is, all right. So anyway, these frames are for their countertop supports. They're going in a dining hall at a local college. They're all made from 1.5" stainless square tubing, 16 gauge wall thickness, and everything needs to be like ground flat, number 4 brush finish. And my work is not over. Actually, this project is gonna necessitate me working most of the weekend, but just that, like that problem solved in like 30 minutes, what in the past, you know, in the past you'd make a cut and then squeeze it together and clamp it and weld it and hope that doesn't warp again, because like you can't fix this with geometry. You have to fix it by understanding the metallurgy, which I don't really. I'm a college dropout. I'm not a certified welder, but like, holy cow, like just knowing how it behaves, just that one trick, it shrinks where you heat it. But yeah, I mean, other than that, like weld wise, I'm very, very pleased with how everything's coming out. Like I'm using a 16th inch serrated tungsten 045 308L stainless filler. I've got the TIG set at 150 amps. I'm running 100% argon at about 25 CFH. I'm using a foot pedal, and that's literally it. That's everything you need to know to build high-end stainless steel tubular frames using pretty much any TIG welder. And I'm using a Furic number 10 gas lens. That's it. Thanks for watching. This is the coolest thing I've discovered in so long. It's really dampening the pain of having to work so long on this stupid project. And seriously consider joining our Patreon if you like stuff like this. The patrons have actually already seen this trick, but with the torch, because I just shot that on my phone, because Aaron and I had sort of the same feeling about a week ago when he first discovered how to do this. So a lot of perks there. Patreon.com/LiftArcStudios. We really appreciate you. If you're not subscribed to this YouTube channel, you're crazy. Please consider subscribing. We love you. We appreciate all of you. See you on the next one. I hope you learned something, because I did. Bye.